Winter in New York is a quiet symphony of golden lights and biting wind. Lucas Brennan's graphite-colored Aston Martin glided through the financial district like a phantom with a mission. He wasn't driving to unwind, he was escaping. At 36, CEO of Neuralsyn, America's top AI medical tech firm, Lucas was considered a cold genius, a man who had turned personal loss into a revolution in modern healthcare. 4 years ago, his fiancée Natalie died during a routine surgery performed by a drunk surgeon. Since then, Lucas buried his emotions beneath tailored suits and 20-hour workdays. He didn't love, he didn't rest, he didn't forgive. Tonight, he had just walked out of a negotiation to acquire a private hospital chain, the same chain that once dismissed his AI as inhuman. Now they'd accepted, out of fear, greed, or market pressure. But Lucas didn't feel victory, just emptiness. Wind howled between skyscrapers as he turned onto the Brooklyn Bridge, the sound blending with an old voice in his head. You thought working harder would save me, but I didn't need saving. I needed you to live. Dim lights, slick roads. Lucas lost control in a heartbeat. The car spun out, tires skating across an invisible layer of black ice. A screech, an impact. Glass shattered. The airbag exploded. His body slammed into the wheel. The world went dark. Everything stopped, except for the crackle of burning metal and the sharp scent of ozone. This wasn't the end. It was where the story truly began. Sienna Carter pulled her white lab coat tighter as she stepped through the revolving doors of St. Jude's emergency department. A sharp gust of cold pierced through her like a warning. She was used to New York winters, but not this sense. This gut-deep feeling that something awful was coming tonight. Night shifts were always unpredictable, but snowy nights? That was disaster's favorite setting. Car crashes, snow shoveling heart attacks, hypothermia, broken bones. Patients poured in like waves, and every one of them carried a life she was sworn to protect. At 30, Sienna had been a nurse for 8 years, long enough to know life and death often hung on a heartbeat, but still young enough to feel her own heart race with every incoming siren. Single vehicle collision, male, unconscious at the scene. A medic shouted as doors slammed open. Trauma room 2. Carter, you're primary, said Dr. Emery, nodding her way. Sienna pulled on her gloves, her eyes scanning the man as the stretcher rushed in. He wore a blood-soaked designer suit. His face was battered, hair matted with blood, and yet his presence was unmistakable. She knew that face. Lucas Brennan, CEO of Neuralsyn. The man now unconscious on her gurney was one of the most influential figures in modern medicine. And right now, he was just a bleeding body. Suspected TBI, open fracture left femur, possible chest bleed, BP unstable, GCS 6, the paramedic rattled off. Sienna took a deep breath. No press, no money, no power, just survival. And she was not about to let him die on her table. Lucas, can you hear me? She said softly as the monitors beeped to life. IVs inserted, oxygen flowing. His eyelid twitched. Not a reflex, a flicker, like a man clawing his way back from the edge. Don't try to talk. You were in a car accident. I'm Sienna. I'm going to take care of you, she said, leaning down, wrapping her fingers gently around his. The touch was instinct, but it made her heart stutter. Lucas let out a faint groan, as though fighting through darkness, and her voice was the only thread pulling him back. His eyes opened, blue-gray, glazed but striking. They found hers, held for just a second. I'm here, she whispered, not letting go. You don't have to fight alone. 3 days after the crash, Lucas Brennan woke to searing white lights and the sterile chill of antiseptic. Consciousness came in slow waves, throbbing head, aching leg, and the steady beeping of monitors tracking each fragile beat. The room was quiet, save for the soft click of a door opening. A familiar figure entered, white coat, calm gaze like deep water. "Sienna," he rasped, "welcome back." She smiled gently, checking his vitals. "You gave everyone quite the scare." Lucas's memory was fragmented. The wind, the Brooklyn Bridge, a flash of light, and her voice. "The company?" he asked. She paused. "Still standing, just like you." "I can't lie here. I need my laptop, my phone, the neural net project files." "No," her tone was firm. "You suffered a traumatic brain injury. Doctors prescribed a minimum of 4 weeks off. No stress, no work." Lucas pushed himself upright, grimacing from the pain. "I don't have time to rest. I have a company waiting. And if you die, that company won't have a CEO." Sienna sat beside him, eyes steady. "I'm not here to enable your schedule. I'm here to keep you alive." Lucas squinted. "Do you talk to all your patients like this?" "Only the ones who think they're invincible." Silence stretched between them. Tense but not hostile. Lucas wasn't used to being challenged, but something in her, a quiet strength, made resistance seem foolish. That afternoon, St. Jude's board convened. After review, they approved Neuralsyn's special request. Lucas would be discharged early, but only under strict in-home medical supervision. The assigned nurse, Sienna Carter. She didn't refuse, but she certainly didn't expect to move into Lucas Brennan's penthouse, a luxurious space as cold and empty as its owner. Sienna stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching New York glow beneath a winter sky. Behind her, the man she was tasked to protect was flipping through financial documents with stitches still fresh. "You need to take your meds and rest," she said. "You're a nurse, not a warden." Lucas replied, eyes locked on his screen. "No, I'm the only one keeping you from destroying yourself." She unplugged his laptop. Lucas snapped his head toward her. "Did you just protect your life?" she said simply. "Either you cooperate or I call your doctor and have you readmitted." They locked eyes. Silence. Then he chuckled, just a small, gravelly laugh. For the first time in years, someone didn't fear his power, and somehow that made him feel safe. Only 2 days into living in Lucas Brennan's penthouse, Sienna Carter realized one thing with painful clarity. He didn't need a nurse, he needed control. Lucas wasn't used to anyone else occupying his space. The apartment spanned over 4,000 square feet, but every step Sienna took, every time she checked his medication schedule, every gentle reminder to rest, felt to him like an intrusion. "I've lived here 8 years without anyone interfering," Lucas snapped when he caught her reorganizing the medicine cabinet. "I don't need a babysitter tracking my every breath." "And yet you almost died alone on the Brooklyn Bridge," Sienna replied, unshaken. Lucas turned, his eyes sharp as blades. "You're in my home, and I'm here to keep you alive, not to make myself comfortable." Her voice was calm but unyielding. "I don't need your approval. I need you alive long enough to recover." He narrowed his gaze, gripping the armrest tightly. "You don't understand. This isn't about health. This is about privacy. I don't want anyone in my personal life." Sienna took a slow breath and stepped closer, her eyes locked on his. "I'm not in your life. I'm doing my job. If you see every person as a threat, that's your wound to manage, not mine." Silence. The air pulled taut like a wire. Lucas looked away, lips pressed thin. He said nothing more. But in that moment, she knew. She'd made him retreat, even just an inch. Not with kindness, but with truth. 6 days into her stay at Lucas's penthouse, Sienna Carter began to see that the real healing happened between blood pressure readings and bandage changes, in the silences no one else noticed. Lucas no longer bristled at every reminder to take his meds. He remained aloof, curt, but had stopped pushing her away. He started asking unusual questions about where she grew up, why she chose medicine, and once quietly about faith. Sienna didn't answer right away, but one night, as a light rain tapped on the windows and she brewed tea in the open kitchen, Lucas hobbled in on his crutches for water. No one ever taught Sienna that some wounds couldn't be stitched with thread and gauze. She learned that on the 10th day of living with Lucas Brennan, when he suddenly asked, "Do you think people can forgive what they can't forget?" The question dropped into the quiet kitchen like a stone. Only the gentle bubbling of the kettle filled the space. Sienna was making tea as she did every night. Lucas sat at the table, his casted leg resting across a chair. She turned, searching for sarcasm in his tone, but this time it wasn't there. "Forgiveness is a choice," she replied slowly. "Forgetting is a reflex. You can choose to forgive and still remember forever." Lucas said nothing. His eyes stayed fixed on the rising steam from the cup in front of him. She died on the operating table, a laparoscopic procedure, simple, routine, but the surgeon was drunk, and the hospital, they covered it up. I found out after it was too late. Sienna set his tea down gently. She didn't speak. She didn't offer comfort. She just sat beside him, her presence a quiet anchor. "I thought if I worked myself to exhaustion, I'd forget. But the pain doesn't leave. It just settles in like shrapnel, waiting for the wrong movement to pierce again." The overhead light cast a golden sheen across his face, highlighting the exhaustion he never let show. Sienna wrapped her fingers around her mug. "I lost my dad at 19, roofer. He fell from a second floor, a misplaced nail. The contractor tried to erase the scene before calling for help." Lucas looked at her, quiet. "That day I swore I'd become a nurse, so people wouldn't die because someone else stopped caring." For the first time, his eyes didn't calculate or assess. They understood, not with logic, but with grief, a kind of recognition that only those who've lost truly share. From that day, something shifted between them, not with grand gestures, but in the smallest of things. Lucas stopped pulling away when Sienna steadied him. He let her play soft music while she changed his bandages. And when she handed him pills, he didn't ask the dosage. He simply nodded. One afternoon, as sunlight spilled through the drapes onto polished floors, Lucas sat in his armchair reading. Sienna approached, stethoscope in hand. "Wait," he said, voice gentler than usual. "You mentioned once you were good with data?" Sienna blinked. "I took a few AI and hospital systems courses, just out of curiosity." Lucas nodded. "Could you look at the neural net 3.0 response simulations? I'd like a different perspective. No command, no control, a genuine request." And Sienna smiled, pulled up a chair beside him, and opened the binder. In that moment, the cold, echoing penthouse felt just a little warmer, not because of heat, but because two people were quietly, carefully moving toward each other. They didn't have to name each other's pain. The understanding lived in their eyes, in the easy silences between words, in the way they both knew when not to speak. Lucas Brennan, a man who lost his fiancée to medical negligence. Sienna Carter, a woman who lost her father to one careless nail. Two people from opposite worlds, he, surrounded by glass towers and billion-dollar contracts. She, walking hospital corridors in scuffed shoes that smelled faintly of antiseptic. And yet between them, a thread, thin, invisible. Not love, not duty, but a shared wound that hadn't fully healed, and a mutual vow, never to let someone else suffer as they once did. Lucas looked at her as if seeing someone clearly for the first time, not through profiles, resumes, or roles, but through quiet resilience. And Sienna, for the first time, didn't see Lucas as just another patient, but as someone also trying to relearn how to live. It was a windy evening. Sienna was helping Lucas finish his physical therapy, knee bends, balance work, small, painful motions. His shirt clung to him, drenched in sweat. His jaw clenched with each movement, but he didn't complain. "Just 10 more seconds. You've got this," she encouraged, hands steady at his knee. Lucas gritted his teeth. The pain wasn't just physical, it was the helplessness of a man who used to control everything, now relearning how to stand. When they were done, he collapsed into the chair, chest heaving. "This is the part I hate most," he muttered, "and yet you never skip it." Sienna wiped the sweat from his forehead. Lucas opened his eyes. In that instant, his gaze shifted, from patient to something far more human, far more vulnerable. Before she could pull her hand away, he leaned in and pressed his lips softly to hers. For a heartbeat, time stopped. Even Lucas didn't know why he leaned in, only that for once, something stronger than control took over. The world fell away. There was only breath and closeness and something too deep for words. Then she stepped back. Her face stayed gentle, but her eyes changed, torn, startled, guarded. "Lucas," she whispered, "you shouldn't have done that." He looked at her. No apology, no defense, just silence and a hint of something fragile in his expression. "I'm sorry," she said, barely audible. "I need time and space." She left the room, and Lucas sat alone in the dim light, aching in places his body hadn't touched. 3 days passed in awkward silence before an uninvited guest arrived. Blake Monroe, Neural Syn's co-founder and Lucas's longtime partner. He walked into the penthouse as if it still belonged to him. "You look worse than I expected," Blake joked. "Nobody taking care of you?" Lucas didn't flinch. "I'm fine." Blake scanned the room. "Where's your nurse? Or has she become something more?" Lucas's grip tightened on the armrest. "Watch your mouth," Blake smirked. "I'm just concerned, Lucas. You're letting personal emotions cloud your judgment. The board is asking questions. Why is our CEO gone for over a month? And why do your recent decisions feel uncharacteristically soft?" "You mean human?" Lucas shot back. "I mean you're losing your edge." Blake dropped a folder onto the table. "The board is meeting next week. If you don't return to active leadership, they'll appoint interim control. I've been nominated." Lucas stared at the folder. He said nothing, but his eyes darkened. "Are you really going to risk the company for a nurse?" Blake asked coldly. That night, Lucas sat alone on the balcony, the wind slicing through his robe. In his palm, a photo, the original neural net sketch he and Blake had scribbled on a whiteboard years ago. Behind him, the sliding door creaked open. Sienna stepped out, blanket in hand. She didn't speak. She draped it over his shoulders, gently. "You're shivering," she murmured. Lucas turned to her. "Blake's right about one thing. If I choose you, I could lose everything." Sienna sat beside him. "And if you don't choose what makes you feel alive, then you've already lost it all." Silence, but not the kind that pushes people apart. This one pulled them together. Lucas didn't kiss her, and she didn't touch him. They just sat there, close enough to know. The line had blurred, but the feeling, it was real. The message arrived at 5 a.m. Special board meeting, 10 a.m. today. Agenda, review of temporary suspension of CEO Lucas Brennan. Lucas read every word like they were carved into his skin. He wasn't surprised, not after what Blake Monroe had said to him 3 days earlier. But what caught in his throat wasn't the risk of losing his position. It was the look in Sienna Carter's eyes when he handed her the phone. She was silent, for a long time. At last, she placed her hand flat on the table, gentle but decisive. "Maybe it's time I leave." Lucas stared at her. "No." "Lucas," she interrupted, voice low. "If they're going to use me to destroy you, I can't sit by and let that happen. This isn't your fault." But it's my presence. Her smile was soft and aching. I came to help you heal, not to destroy everything you've built. Lucas stood and stepped closer. You didn't destroy anything. You're the only reason I'm still breathing. Sienna looked up, her eyes red but steady. I love you, Lucas, and because of that, I have to walk away. She left just before sunrise, leaving behind a silence no sound could fill. 7 a.m. Floor 32, the boardroom, walls of glass, a digital display showing Neuralsyn's fluctuating stock. Lucas entered. His dark suit couldn't hide the bandages on his shoulder, but he stood tall. No cane, no nurse. Blake sat at the head of the table, offering a polite nod, one that didn't reach his eyes. Lucas, one board member began, we received a formal concern submitted by Mr. Monroe. He expressed doubts about your leadership capacity during your recovery. Additionally, she hesitated. There are reports of an inappropriate relationship with a private healthcare provider, breaching our ethical standards. Lucas was silent. One beat. Then he slowly stood. You know who I am. You've seen me take Neuralsyn from sketches on a whiteboard to the global leader in medical AI. His voice was clear, steady. I won't deny I've been recovering from a serious injury. And yes, during that time, I've been under the care of a nurse, a woman who not only saved my life, but reminded me why I started this journey in the first place. Blake folded his hands, his lips pressed thin. I'm not apologizing for that, Lucas continued. I've spent my life turning technology into hope. But somewhere along the way I forgot. Hope isn't the goal. Life is. And she, the woman you call a threat, reminded me of that. No one spoke. Lucas exhaled slowly. If you believe I'm unfit to lead, I will step down, if that's what this company needs. But if you still believe in the man who built what you're sitting on today, then I'm still here. Silence stretched across the room. Then one of the older board members, Mr. Mendel, finally spoke. I once watched Lucas work 40 straight hours to save a rural hospital in New Orleans from shutting down. I still believe in him, and I don't think a man can do that unless he's capable of leading. Several others nodded slowly. Blake said nothing, his jaw tight. That afternoon, Lucas returned to the penthouse. The place felt just as it had the morning he woke after the accident, empty and cold. He sat down, eyes resting on the teacup she once used. Then he stood, picked up the phone, and dialed. Sienna, he said as the line picked up, I didn't choose between you and the company. I chose not to lose both. Silence, then the faint sound of breath catching on the other end. So now, will you still give me a chance? And her answer was the sound of hurried footsteps echoing in the hallway moments later. The apartment felt unnaturally quiet after Sienna's decision to step away. Lucas stood still in the living room, staring at the door that had just closed. That soft click sounded like a silent goodbye. There were no tears, no anger, but the pain was unmistakable. Heavy, like gravity had doubled around him. He turned, lowering himself into the sofa. Her spot, the same one where she once handed him warm ginger tea every evening. Traces of her were everywhere, her gentle scent still lingering, a faint lipstick mark on a forgotten teacup, a medical journal left half open on the table. Lucas closed his eyes. Everything he feared had become reality. Sienna was gone. Blake was staging a coup. The board was filled with doubt. And now he stood at a crossroads once again, forced to choose between his company and the only person who had pulled him back from the edge. The last time he faced such a choice was after Natalie's death. Then he had chosen the company and traded love for 2 hollow years of success, sleepless nights, and emotional numbness. He wasn't sure he had it in him to lose again. Sienna sat in the back of a taxi, clutching her phone. No message from Lucas. She didn't blame him. His silence made sense. He was being pulled in a direction she could never follow. She leaned her head against the cold window, but the chill outside didn't compare to the hollowness inside. "I'm not leaving because I'm weak," she whispered to herself. "I'm leaving because I won't be the reason he falls apart." She remembered the way he had looked at her when he said, "You're the reason I'm still breathing." And she believed him. But sometimes loving someone also meant knowing when to walk away. That night, Lucas opened his laptop and stared at the 10-page strategy Blake had left him. It was neat, well-planned, profitable, but line after line, all he saw was one thing: the complete absence of people, of heart. And that wasn't the neural sin he had built. He stood walking to the glass wall, looking out over the glowing cityscape. Somewhere in that maze of light and lives, someone had just walked away. For his sake. "I won't lose you," he said quietly, a vow whispered to the night. This time he knew he had to choose again, not between love and ambition, but between an empty life and one worth living. Lucas stood alone in the empty boardroom. The pale fluorescent lights reflected off the cold glass table. Just hours ago, this room had been filled with accusations, doubtful glances, and questions about his fitness to lead. Now, all that remained was silence. He rested his hand on the back of the chair, the one reserved for the head of the company. 10 years, a decade driven by ambition, control, and numbers. But no number had held him when he lay unconscious on the street. No business plan had kept his heart beating, except the hands of a nurse named Sienna. He had everything, and nearly died alone. Now he was alive, but about to lose her. Lucas closed his eyes. Her words echoed in his mind. "I came to save you, not to be the reason you fall apart." He opened them again, and for the first time in his life, he feared losing not a company, but a person. He knew he couldn't have both, and this time, he would choose the thing that made his heart still beat. Not power, not shares, but Sienna Carter. Lucas stood in front of the worn wooden door in a modest Brooklyn apartment building. The hallway smelled of paint, takeout food, and life, far removed from the world he used to rule. But tonight, it was the only world he wanted. He knocked. Once, twice, 3 slow breaths. The door opened. Sienna stood there, hair loosely tied, a thin coat over her shoulders. Her eyes held surprise, and something that looked dangerously like hope. Lucas didn't apologize. He didn't fumble for words. He looked straight into her eyes and said, "I don't want to live in a world where you don't exist." Sienna didn't move. So long he thought she might close the door. But then she stepped aside, and just like that, his world had her in it again. They came back together, no longer nurse and patient, but 2 people choosing each other freely. Lucas no longer needed her to survive. He needed her to live. And Sienna stayed not out of duty, but because she believed love could exist between equals. A week later, they sat side by side in a small off-site conference room. Below the new Medical Light Fund proposal, Sienna's idea was one signature: Lucas Brennan. "We'll allocate 5% of quarterly profits to fund community health care and frontline support," Sienna explained to the strategy team. "Not because charity is trendy, but because we forgot why medical tech exists." Lucas nodded. "We don't just write code. We save lives." Applause filled the room. Weeks later, the boardroom atmosphere had shifted. Lucas entered with a folder, calm and steady. "Before the vote on my position as CEO," he began, "I'd like to present something." The screen lit up. Payroll logs, emails, internal records. Each document pointed to Blake Monroe's misconduct, using insider influence, diverting contracts, and quietly investing in Neuralsyn's competitors. The room went still. Lucas ended simply. He didn't just want my job. He wanted to shift Neuralsyn's mission, from saving lives to selling overpriced quick fixes. A director stood. "I move for immediate termination of Blake Monroe." The vote was unanimous. Lucas remained CEO. Before he left the room, he turned back. And for the record, I am in a personal relationship with Miss Sienna Carter. She's no longer employed by the company, but she is the reason I remembered how to be human. No one objected. That evening, under the soft lights of the small apartment, Lucas placed his hand gently over Sienna's as she read through the Foundation's documents. "We have a lot ahead of us," he whispered. Sienna looked at him. "I don't need a grand future. I just need you to keep your word." "I will," he smiled, "because this time, I made the right choice." 1 year later, the once cold penthouse was now bathed in warm morning light. It no longer resembled a sterile shelter for a broken man. It had become a true home. The scent of fresh-baked bread filled the air, soft jazz played from the speakers, and ultrasound photos decorated the fridge like postcards from the future. Sienna stood by the kitchen island, wearing one of Lucas's shirts under a flour-dusted apron, sipping orange juice. Her belly, 6 months along, curved gently beneath the fabric. Lucas walked in behind her, still in pajamas, hair tousled, smile soft. He wrapped his arms around her, hands resting on her belly. "They kicked," Sienna laughed. Lucas closed his eyes, feeling the flutter beneath his palms. 2 little hearts, 2 miracles. They had married last fall, in a small ceremony beneath crimson trees in Central Park. No media, no spectacle, just close friends, quiet vows, and the start of something new. Months later, they launched the Natalie Brennan Foundation, named after Lucas's late fiancée. Part tribute, part redemption. Its mission: provide free diagnostic AI to underfunded hospitals and rural clinics where help was always scarce. "I think Natalie would be proud," Sienna had said as they watched the first mobile unit roll out. Lucas nodded. "She'd understand, and know that you helped me turn guilt into purpose." The penthouse, once echoing with loneliness, now overflowed with life. The sound of laughter, clattering dishes, typing from Foundation reports, and sometimes the rhythmic beat of a tiny heart on an ultrasound machine, like the pulse of a future they'd built together. That evening, Lucas lay on the couch, head resting in Sienna's lap. His hand remained on her stomach, feeling life stir beneath skin. "You know," he whispered, "we built an empire from pain. Natalie, that pain started with you. But you, Sienna, and our child, you are the legacy that will last forever." Sienna leaned down, kissed his forehead, and smiled beneath the soft golden light. And the video faded to black, leaving one final image. A man who once lost everything, now holding the whole world in his hands.